Hello, I just wanted to make a quick follow-up slash FAQ video following on from that last one to cover and elaborate on a few things, so let's go for it. First up, I did not expect that last video to do as well as it has, but hey, I'm glad people are enjoying it. Now, before I get into anything else, turns out that the second hacking website that I talked about is actually run by the people who made Sideloadly. I am sorry I called you sketchy. And not only that, it's also the same forum as was crucial to the Minecraft Apple TV edition video. Everything is connected, how nice. Next, if you specifically already had the Android version of the game installed from way back before my video and it's still working on the latest update with Gary, please dump your copy of the cache data online or get in touch with me and I can help you out if you're not sure how to do it, because that would be great to have, because that's essentially all we're missing. Really, because we only have the slightly older version that doesn't have Gary. Next up, why does the app just still work for some people without doing anything? I have no idea. It seems to be mostly on iOS, but I've had quite a few comments generally from people whose original installs of the game just still work. And while that's cool, it's really weird, and I honestly don't have an explanation for it. And as such, I admit that calling the game lost was a tad clickbaity on my part. Welcome to YouTube! But as far as I'm aware, the 64-bit iOS version was as good as lost if you didn't already have it in your purchases, so I'll take that. Also, I've seen people here and online generally say if you just click the X a few times, it lets you in, despite the fact that
there is no X.
So at first I was just thinking, what
are you talking about?
Someone please provide an image. And then someone did provide an image, and it turns out some people are just still getting the old message, this one, as opposed to this message, and that one does have an X. Next, am I aware of SpongeBob Adventures in a Jam?
I know of it.
Prior to making the video, I had heard of it in passing when looking online to see if anyone was talking about SBMI in any kind of fashion. But even now I know essentially nothing about it besides it being a kind of spiritual successor and using some kind of energy system. Simple truth there is that I just haven't been keeping up with SpongeBob mobile games for the best part of the last 10 years, but yes, I am aware of it. I am now also aware of the significance of moves into the Jeffy's Tantrum video. That one I admit I was completely unaware of before, but I know about it now. Next, I've got quite a few comments asking if I can try and bring back other mobile games from back in the day. The answer to that is maybe, but I might not actually have to. Just for anyone who doesn't know, you can find Android versions of a substantial amount of apps online just from searching the app name and APK, and if the game had additional cache data like SBMI, adding cache or OBB or data to your search will very quickly bring up if it's archived and functional anywhere, and if it is, you should be fairly easily able to download it and manually put it in the internal storage Android OBB folder like with SBMI. iOS is a different story. Personally, I was really not much of an iPad kid in the usual sense, by which I just mean I didn't play that many games. But here is a list of all of the apps I've ever used, and as such still have access to, delisted and otherwise, so if any of these are otherwise missing, I will gladly decrypt and archive these. That is, as long as it's 64-bit. A fairly common request I got was to look at SpongeBob Diner Dash, and while this was one of the games I did play, the app is 32-bit, meaning it can only be played on iOS 10 or below. Even with jailbreaking and such, from what I understand, you'd need essentially an entire 32-bit second copy of iOS on top of your main 64-bit one for it to work. The good news, silver lining kind of thing to this, is that a ton of devices lost iOS update support at iOS 9.3.5, and iOS 9.3.6 for a few, so finding a second-hand compatible device shouldn't be too hard if you're that way inclined. I haven't looked at prices or anything, but off the top of my head I'd imagine a 5th gen iPod Touch would probably be a cheapest option. Although I did once have an app refuse to install on an iPod Touch because it required some iPhone specific feature, so keep that in mind. On top of all that, TrollStore and by extension TrollDecrypt are only compatible with iOS 14 at the lowest, and while it's definitely possible to unconjoin an older 32-bit app from your account, as per Dono's app featuring Hatsune Miku, I'm not aware of the details of this method, so I'd have to do more research and testing. With all of that said, something I didn't know about until after the video was posted, but that I wanted to bring your attention to, was the SpongeBob IPA archive on the Internet Archive. All the apps on it are 32-bit, meaning the same iOS 10 situation applies, but it's still cool to see and might have what you're looking for. And it does contain SpongeBob Diner Dash. It even also has a few 32-bit older versions of SBMI. On the same kind of topic, can I specifically hack other mobile games in the same way? The answer to that one is also maybe. Throughout the first video, I made a bit of a running joke about the game being not written very well, and while that did lead to a lot of bugs, it was ultimately a substantial factor in how I was able to modify my save data in the way that I did. All of the save data being entirely non-obfuscated in plain text in game.json is unfortunately not a luxury we can just assume from other games. While I was working on this project, I did actually also try to see if I could do the same kind of thing with the game Cars Fast as Lightning, and while the APK and OBB combo worked in the same way from that same website, I wasn't able to figure out where the player save data even was, let alone how to modify it. So ultimately, is it possible to hack your specific game of choice? Probably yes, but whether or not I specifically can figure it out is very much down to how much effort the developers put into trying to stop me. Next, can I reverse engineer, open source, and re-implement the server Sonic Runners style? No. As I'm sure you could tell from my hacking in the last video, I basically have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm just trying stuff out and hoping for the best. And while that's how I've learned basically everything nerdy like this that I know so far, I feel that is just well out of my depth. If someone who knows what they're doing wants to give this a go, I'd definitely be interested in covering it, so that's you. Let me know. On a side note to this, I apologise if my poor attempts at programming in the last video caused you physical pain because you actually know what you're doing. I'm sorry I didn't quite beat you in the fictional who's the biggest nerd competition, but I'm you know, you've got to learn, you've got to start somewhere. I don't know what I'm doing, I've never done this before. But for people giving me actual advice and, you know, constructive criticism, thank you. I will gladly take any of that for future reference. Anyway, can I take the decompilation idea further, and can we maybe even get a PC port of the game? Again, maybe. It would definitely take someone more knowledgeable than me, but as far as I'm aware, a decompilation is pretty likely to be possible thanks to the game being built in Unity. It's just whether or not it could be ported to PC very much depends on what libraries the game uses. If it relies on some Android iOS only ARM machine code library, we're probably stuck, but once again, and as usual, I'm basically talking out my rear end and I've no real idea of the nitty gritty, so take it with a grain of salt. Why in the world was I not using Notepad++? Honestly, I have no idea. I am entirely aware of its existence and even have a link on my desktop, but for some reason it just never even occurred to me to use it. On the note of my desktop though, why in the world am I using Windows 7, and even more confusingly, why am I using it on a Mac? The simple and frankly quite sad answer is that I just really like Windows 7 and think Windows 10 is a hideous, unstable mess.
My God, you're ugly, aren't you?
So while I do also have a Windows 10 virtual machine on hand for a few things that need it, all of my Windows-based affairs are covered by my Windows 7 VM, which I created from an install I had on a ThinkPad prior to this. And since I only ever use it for offline tasks, the security risks don't really factor in. As for why on a Mac, the simple answer is that what I really would want to do is have a framework laptop within which I'd virtualize macOS, but thanks to Apple being a bit of a pain, that leaves you with essentially no hardware acceleration unless you're an absolute wizard, which as you've probably learned by now, I am not. So yeah, basically I need features of both OSs, so I just use both at once. I even dabble in Linux occasionally. So yeah, that's everything I wanted to touch on, just quickly to elaborate on a few things, answer a few questions, and I'm not sure where exactly I'm going to go from here in terms of content and even just this game, but yeah. Also, I was pointed in the general direction of some of the Android game modding tools which are available, specifically in my case from r/freemedia heck yeah, and I haven't looked into them in any amount of detail, but for anyone looking for a mildly easier way to mess around with your currency values, that would definitely be worth having a look at, because the simplicity that the game was written in means that I reckon even the most basic modding tool could probably do it for you.